Okay, so we're going to continue where we left off. And that's right, because gavel isn't an onomatopoeia, so it's not like a go. That didn't work. All right. Appropriate settings for clinical practice is where we left off. So, commissioners, do you have any comments on point A? Commissioner Hind?
I think it goes back to the intent of having candidates go to different placements. I would say on the short, no, it doesn't necessarily have to be in different placements, but I would not support an idea that an independent study placement or only online teaching placement is getting to the heart of what the intent of clinical practice is. So I don't know how to say that in a way that makes more sense or clarifies it for programs, but I think it goes back to, are you really going to be getting the robust experience that we're hoping you get if you're just participating in clinical experience through an online teaching experience?
And I believe that we've had the conversation about private schools in the past, that if they're teaching in a private school but they're getting a credential, a state credential, that there's a disconnect. And so, right, because people who teach in private schools don't necessarily need a credential. And so they're not getting the experience that necessarily that we want as a state commission.
And also on that piece with the private schools, I know it's in there, I read it, it's about the diversity, making sure that we have, because if you're going to a private school, if you are running a private school, you don't necessarily have to take students that fall in certain categories, whether it's special needs or not your same religion or whatever it is that your mandates are for accepting students.
Student representative?
Yeah, just to speak from personal experience, I went to 5 different placements during my program. And I learned something new from every single one, not only because the teachers I worked with had different teaching philosophies, but I worked with different age groups. I met different students from different homes and different families and different lifestyles. So I think it's beneficial for teachers to go to different placements. I know a couple teachers, multiple subject, who stayed in one placement their entire time, let's say kindergarten, for example, but then they got placed in 5th grade. So they have never, worked in a 5th grade classroom or even seen how working with older kids is, because it's very different. So I think it's beneficial to see different grade levels, different teachers, different districts, because it kind of gives you an idea and it helps you build your teaching philosophy. Because I came in thinking one idea and I thought that was my teaching philosophy. And then after experiencing all these different classrooms, it changed, and I think it got better. So I think it's important that teachers get to see different settings and students.
Excellent. Commissioner Cook?
In terms of numbers there, I think most of the hours should be done. It doesn't have to be in one sense, but I think in traditional classrooms, in a sense. Well, I mean, in terms of, can it be done in all completely online teaching? No, because you don't get that, as Commissioner Hines said, the richness, the experience that you would need to teach in for our students. Could some of it be done? I'm not saying entirely, but some of it for online, possibly, because like this, I'm going to have for first time ever, I want to teach one section of an online chemistry class this year. I don't know how it's going to go. But could some of the hours be online? Possibly, but not entirely, as this thing states, is my personal opinion.
Commissioner Sloan?
These are good comments. I agree that we need some some variety in the kinds of placements that we expect. And I think the important thing to note is we are certifying teachers to be qualified to teach in California's public school classrooms. And even though employers are going to look at a person's experiences and make a decision about hiring based on that, we are still guaranteeing with our credential that they're qualified to teach in multiple settings. And so we then have to grapple with, again, balancing residency programs that have a lot of benefits to having a candidate being very immersed in one school setting for an entire year, with opportunities like our student liaison talked about, having multiple perspectives on seeing things. I would agree that having just being in an independent study or an online environment and not experiencing anything else is too restrictive to being certified to teach in all public schools. On the other hand, I also look now at this point in time, and again, looking more at what are exemplary practice and what are the criteria that we would want to aspire to in terms of our performance. Shouldn't we wish that our teacher candidates are being exposed to online environments for teaching, because that is the way of the future, or other educational situations that were not the same as what they grew up in? One of the things when I was a program director that I thought was one of the best things we did as a program is we started international student teaching placements, exchanges. And the part that was excellent about that was that for the student teachers who got to go, they spent 1 month in a different country teaching, student teaching in a classroom and being supported in that work. And we hosted their teachers who worked with our cooperating teachers. And the fact is that most of the people who go into teaching have spent their entire lives in our public school settings since they were 5 years old. It's what they know. And we have this thing in teacher preparation that we call apprenticeship of observation. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to teach new teachers because they have a framework for how things are supposed to work. And it's one reason I think it's very difficult to change the way things are done in schools. So maybe we should actually require some other kinds of settings to do work in, or at the very least say these are exemplary kinds of practices. Maybe not at this point in time do we say every teacher candidate needs to have this, but we might want to emphasize that this is important to gain other perspectives on how you educate.
Okay.
Apprenticeship of observation. Yeah, it's one of the three big problems of learning to teach. Sort of like the complexity of practice, the apprenticeship of observation, and gosh, there was one more. I think it's the applicability of practice. It's not just learning what practice is; it's actually doing it. Anyway, so there's a lot of literature around that. Yeah.
So is everybody comfortable moving on to 4? All right, so we'll move on to 4, multiple subject candidate placements. Commissioner Hind?
I was going to make a really bad Rika joke, but I'll save it. Thank you for that, laughing at it. Just on the number 1, is it acceptable for multiple subject candidates to complete student teaching or be interns in middle school course settings only? Your credential, multiple subject credential, is good through 8th grade. I don't see why not. My guess is that if you are wanting to do your student teaching in a middle school, it's because you probably want to teach middle school. If we want to start looking at middle school as not being part of a multiple subject credential, that's a whole different thing. But as far as it stands right now, I don't see why it wouldn't be acceptable since your credential covers through 8th grade. So.
I guess the question, if I could jump in, is not whether it's acceptable, whether it's sufficient. If you're doing math and science only during your placement and not having the opportunity to do core setting in English and social studies. So that's the question, if you're only in math and science or only in core setting. So that's the question.
So I think it goes back to what are we wanting them to learn in their student teaching. It's not about content knowledge necessarily, because you're getting proof of content knowledge in many other ways, whether it's through MSAT or RECA or classes that you're taking. You're showing that you can teach the content, or that you know the content, or can find out how to learn the content. But what I think, I could be totally wrong, but what I think the kind of the purpose of student teaching is more of, can you teach these things? So, and I think you can learn that in a middle school setting, even if you're just teaching 1 or 2 subject areas.
Student Representative Shoup.
Thank you. I think that's similar to special education. We can teach any subject, but we don't actually student teach in every subject. So some of my cohort is teaching science and math, but they never student taught in a science or math class. So I think it's similar to that. I don't necessarily see a big difference in that one, because I wasn't aware that multiple subject could teach up to 8th grade until right now. But if their credential says they can, then it's similar to us as special education. We can teach any grade level and any subject.
Commissioner Sloan.
I would just add that yes, our candidates have demonstrated and will demonstrate their content knowledge in a variety of ways, but particular disciplines have particular disciplinary core practices that don't necessarily transfer at a high level across content. So I would be worried that someone who did all their student teaching in a math science core in, say, the 6th grade ended up, and they have a multiple subject credential, ended up teaching English, for instance, reading, and having no background other than coursework background in the really important critical pedagogical moves that you make to develop ELA.
Commissioner Martinez and then Commissioner Sloan.
I think similarly about just developmental phases of children and youth, a first grader versus a 6th grader. And so the content is one issue too, but the pedagogical strategies that are age appropriate is also a challenge in terms of expecting someone who's been teaching solely in middle school to then be able to transition to a lower elementary.
I think my only concern I would have is because I have a friend who just got moved from like 6th grade to 3rd grade, and she hasn't taught 3rd grade in years. So I think if, say, someone had just got their training in that, there's a world of difference. And in some of the smaller schools, it might be bigger schools too, sometimes that happens. They get moved from 6th grade to 2nd grade, then maybe back to 4th grade. So my concern would be if someone didn't, it is like night and day. Because luckily when I went through my program, every semester I had a different setting, and I thought I wanted elementary. I learned very quickly in 2 days I didn't want elementary, so I went to the junior high and was much happier. So that would just be, and so I see the frustration some of these people are going through now that they're getting switched, and they don't have that background to deal with the younger students. They've been in the upper grades, but because you're K through 8th, you can kind of get shuffled around at the need of the school. So you don't really have a say.
Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one because in some ways the pedagogical content knowledge and practice is an important thing to consider. The developmental progression of children's learning and development, and the reality of schools and placements, which are that you may find yourself at any point in time teaching in a setting that you haven't experienced. I guess I am just thinking about what we're qualifying teachers to teach. So multiple subject teachers are supposed to be qualified to teach multiple subjects for K-8 students. Similarly, when we certify single subject teachers in a particular content area, we require them to have some pedagogical knowledge in that area. It used to be that you could add on a content area to your credential by just taking the CSET and showing that you had subject matter content. Now we're saying, no, we need to know that you have some pedagogical content knowledge through at least coursework. I would love that to expand someday to actually experiencing teaching in a classroom. But again, we've got to balance how we do our work. So I don't know. I don't think we have an answer to this one exactly, but it is all of the points that people have brought up here that we need to bring to the table as we do our next steps.
Commissioner Kuhn?
I agree with Commissioner Martinez that it'll be great, that someone, a teacher candidate, has experience in 6th grade, 1st grade, 8th grade math, 7th grade English, but the reality is we can't have them do everything. And I agree also with Commissioner Hines that, good teaching, if you know how to teach, that's kind of the point of student teaching. So if you learn that and you already proven that you have the content knowledge, that could it be done in that one middle school, just math, science only? I think, yeah, because I assume if I'm a principal and I see a candidate who did that, or someone finished a teaching credential and did their thing in middle school science only, I probably might not want them to hire them as a 1st grade teacher if I have lots of other applicants anyways.
Commissioner Hyde?
One thing that I love about this conversation is that it's opening up a conversation that early childhood has had for a long time, which is early childhood education is so much different than middle school education, which is so much different than high school education. And so while we can't fix that problem today, it's good that we're thinking that way, because the developmental needs of children starting at birth and going through even college, it's so huge. And if we were really doing an awesome job, what we could do is break it up and have credentials for early childhood, middle early childhood, later early childhood, a little bit older childhood, and then just keep going on until we really hit on all of those. But we can't do that. It's not really possible. But we can start thinking that way of what are the real needs and what's our true desire to meet the needs of all the students that come through our schools.
Okay, so I think that's a good comment to close this item on, unless there's something urgent that,
Literacy? Did we talk about that one? That's the last question. It is very related to all the comments that you just mentioned, I think, but we would like to hear from you.
Commissioner Sloan?
Is it possible that when we have our conversation around teaching literacy for the next meeting, that could inform this piece better?
Great idea.
Okay. And I just wanted to add, the apprenticeship of observation idea originated with Dan Lordy. I need to make sure that I attribute it correctly. Not my idea, no.
Great.
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
So that completes this item.
I think this was very helpful. So thank you. I think this gave us a sense of kind of where you're at the moment, so we can kind of go back and work on with the field and kind of figure out whether there's something that needs to be done to clarify a few areas. I did want to mention that I know that we're always trying to aim towards best practices, but the fact of the matter is there is an element of compliance when it comes to the accreditation system. So making sure that the standards give some teeth to accreditation teams should they find that they don't believe that there's enough depth or breadth of experiences is really almost as important, so that we can stand behind those decisions that they make. So thank you very much for this conversation. I think it was helpful.
Commissioner Sloan?
Sorry, wanted to add one more thing, because at the very end of your item, talks about what your next steps might be. And you propose some things like we could do a survey, we could do some focus group interviews. Commissioner Barnes mentioned something at the very beginning. What if we interview people who have been in their first or second year of teaching and said, what did you miss? What did it, those kinds of things. And our surveys do give us some information on that, but maybe we want to be more specific. So I was also curious if commissioners have ideas about if we're going to investigate and ensure that we're getting the right feedback and enough feedback. Does anybody have ideas on how we might do that as we improve the work?
How do we send out those surveys? Because I just never have seen one of the surveys that are talked about here. So I'm just interested on how is it like getting sent out to principals and then principals are sending them out to teachers, or how are they getting out to the teachers?
It's my understanding that when you complete your credential, like as you go online and you complete that, then you're taken to a survey. Is that correct?
Correct. For program completers, that is exactly right. And fortunately, our response rate is very high, doing it that way, thanks to Terry Clark and all of her efforts with our IT staff. We also have mentor survey. We also have an employer survey, and those are done in different ways. And obviously, it's harder to get employers to respond. We don't have a way of capturing in the same way. So our response rates aren't as high. But we have 9 different surveys right now that are in operation and that we use in the accreditation system.
Okay.
Director Sandy?
I'm thinking about this, thinking about some of these questions. Many of these questions are, I think they're emanating largely from the programs we accredit. I don't know of anybody who's completed a program who has actually asked a question like this, right? So I think that the request for clarification and clarity is from the people we regulate through accreditation. And I don't know whether the right vehicle for this would be our normal end of program survey. It seems to me that we need to have an approach that gets a little bit outside of that and into a more specialized request. Maybe there are different kinds of opportunities where we could get different populations to look at this with us. I'm really intrigued by the tension or the balance point between compliance and quality, and and understanding that compliance is going to breed all kinds of questions just like these. When we set the bar right here and you don't meet that bar, oh, well, so sorry, you didn't hit your 600 hours, you only got 595, so what happens then? Not the way we want to engage with the field. That's not, this isn't a new numbers game, this is a quality game. So I appreciate the question of, what strategies might make the most sense for collecting feedback on this. My guess is that the community of program faculty are probably the people that are going to debate these questions the most fully. But we don't want to be exclusive to that community at all. I think that our student here has been a wonderful insight, your particular experiences and what you've gleaned from that, the teachers at this table, what your experiences have been, really quite important. So I don't know we've got a good answer about the survey strategy yet, but I think it's probably needs to go beyond what we're doing as end of credential survey.
Yes, Commissioner Francois?
And I would caution against another survey. Our candidates, our employers, and our alumni have survey fatigue beyond belief. But I was recently on a working group for Superintendent Thurman's transition team, and he had these regional convenings around particular topics, and his office didn't pay for us to attend, but they invited folks to apply to be part of this working group because there was going to be some significant decisions made based on the feedback. And I think that program faculty and alumni and students, they want their voices heard, and they want their real voices heard. They don't want a survey filled out. And I think that we should think about how do we bring folks together in person, and it actually could be online via Zoom to bring in multiple voices around the key questions that we think we need feedback on immediately and then think more long term. But please, no more surveys.
I think these topics are hard to grapple with on a survey. They're complex and they're deep, and you need to have follow up and kind of understand how a program is designed and that kind of thing. So I think a face-to-face, some sort of focus groups or work group or whatever to kind of talk it through would be helpful.
And our stakeholders who all belong to associations that are affected by this, perhaps when they have their annual convening, we could host a breakout session and have face-to-face conversations, right? I mean, because that's who we want to hear from, and they're all in that place at that time. And I'm sure glad to give their feedback. Okay, so we are moving on. Thank you so much for listening and requesting our feedback on this. It's great to have clarity on these topics, which we don't have yet, but we're getting there. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Hickey and Mr. Schuler. We're now moving on to item 2C, the annual report on passing rates of commission-approved examinations from 2013 to 14 to 2017 to 18. This item is being presented by Catherine Polster and Mike Taylor. This is an information item. Ms. Polster, will you please begin?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We're here to present the annual report on passing rates for commission-approved examinations from 2013 to 2018. In addition to first-time and cumulative pass rates, the report also includes information on the statutory purpose, test structure, availability of study materials, and the scoring process for exams. The Commission's examinations are minimum competency criterion referenced assessments, and candidates are expected to do well when they have the knowledge represented in the subject matter requirements. Throughout today's presentation, we will touch briefly on the passing rates for the individual set of examinations and have provided information for all of the examinations within the item text and in the appendices. When analyzing first-time and cumulative passing rate data, it's important to consider some caveats specific to these data sets. First, throughout the tables, you'll see exam scores are reported by academic year cohorts, and the first-time passing rates are nearly always lower than the cumulative passing rates. This is due to the fact that the previous year's cohorts have had more time and opportunity to retake the examinations and improve the scores for the 5-year cumulative pass rates. An example of this is on table 3 on page 9 of the report, and that shows the first time and cumulative pass rates for the CBEST examination. And without considering the cohort year structure, it may appear that the cumulative passing rates for CBEST are decreasing. However, these pass rates are only a snapshot in time. For example, in last year's report, the 2016-17 cohort had a cumulative pass rate of 76.2 for CBEST. But when you look at this year's same cohort, the report shows that the pass rate has gone up to 82.6% because candidates within the cohort have had an additional year to achieve a passing score on the examination, thus raising the entire cohort's cumulative 5-year pass rate. The second caveat is that it's important to know that the demographic data is voluntarily self-reported by the candidate at the time of registration, and when making multiple attempts at an examination, the candidates may change their self-reported demographic information or may choose not to report it at all. Third, for reasons of candidate privacy, the Commission does not report on pass rates for groups of less than 10. Throughout the report, you'll see an asterisk denoting the omission of data for those small groups. And then finally, in large-scale assessment, differential passing rates by demographic subgroups are not considered biased in and of themselves. Commission examinations are designed in part to uncover these differences in scores according to various subgroups, particularly groups based on race and ethnicity, to help understand the gaps in education among the population of candidates coming into the teacher profession. Processes to avoid bias are built into the Commission's examination development and administration process, including a bias review committee. And the bias review committee consists of California educators who are who represent the diverse racial, ethnic, bilingual, geographic, and gender identities within California. They are charged with reviewing subject matter requirements, competency statements, and individual test items for concerns of potential bias affecting the ability to accurately measure an examinee's knowledge. Now we'll move on to the examination, individual examinations. I'm going to touch on CBEST, and then Mike will take you through the remaining examinations. CBEST continues to be the most popular option that individuals choose for meeting the California Basic Skills requirement. The additional options for meeting the basic skills requirement are on page 7 of the item. The item consists, or the examination consists of 3 sections: reading, math, and writing, and examinees must pass all 3 sections to pass the CBEST. Table 2 on page 9 shows the number of examinees taking CBEST. And while we've seen an increase in the number of examinees over the last several years, our most recent set of data shows a small decrease in the number of administrations. And the CBEST examination is the best indicator of interest in the teaching profession, as it tends to be one of the first tasks completed in pursuing a teaching credential. And for the 5 years covered in this report, the first-time passing rate for examinees that completed all 3 sections of the exam is 67.6%, and the cumulative passing rate is 83.8%. And it continues to hold that roughly more than 15% of examinees who take all 3 sections of the CBEST never pass the examination regardless of how often they take it. On tables 8 and 9 on pages 11 and 12 of the item, you'll see the first time and cumulative passing rates by gender and ethnicity, and then the additional demographic data for CBEST is located in Appendix A.
Thanks. I'm going to talk a little bit about CSET and then go through the rest of the exam results with you, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Like CBEST is used to measure the basic skills option for California educators, the CSET is used to measure the Commission's subject matter requirement and to show that credential candidates can demonstrate the necessary level of knowledge for content knowledge in particular for the credential that they're earning. We've recently done some CSET revisions, and we've been here to talk to you about a number of these over the last few years. Most recently, we were here last year to talk about revisions to the science examinations. In 2017-18, we completed working with California Content Expert Advisory Panels to revise the CSET, multiple subjects and CSET science exams, and align them with the next generation science standards. The updated science examinations were launched during the 2017-18 academic year, which is the most recent year we report on for this. So this is the first report on the results of those new science examinations. Table 10 shows the breadth of the CSET program, including the examination titles, number of subtests, and the numbers and types of items included in each of the examination titles. As you can see, it goes on for quite a while. We've got a lot of CSET exams happening all the time. In Table 11, you can see passing rates. You can see the numbers of people who took the CSET for each of the years reported for this report and since the inception of the CSET. The first CSETs were administered in 2003, and additional titles have been developed during the years since. If you look at Table 11 at the number of examinees, you'll be able to see for each of the last 5 years, each year for the last 5, and then for each exam, the since inception title refers to since the exam was new. So that's 2003 for many of these, and a little bit later for some of the newer exams. Table 13 shows the annual and cumulative passing rates for each of the content area titles for CSET. For this report, as we mentioned, annual results are for the 17-18 academic year. That's the most recent year's data we have. And the cumulative results are for the life of each exam title. You notice there are multiple rows for content areas like science that have been redeveloped in the last few years. It's interesting to note when you look at that table that the first-time passing rates for the new science examinations in most cases are higher than the first-time passing rates were for the previous set of science examinations. Table 15 shows the passing rates for CSET overall by candidate, gender, and ethnicity, and then in the appendix you'll find the same information for all the individual titles of CSET. Next in the item is the National Evaluation Series, the NES exams, which we refer to more often, I think, as APK, which stands for Assessment of Professional Knowledge. These are off-the-shelf exams that were adopted by the Commission in 2014 for a very specific use with the early completion option of intern preparation programs. There are two APK assessments used in California, one for multiple subject candidates and one for single subject candidates. Tables 17 and 18 show the number of candidates who use the APK assessments and their passing rates. Following the NES assessments is RECA. RECA, of course, is the Reading Instruction Competence Assessment, and it tests professional knowledge related to the teaching of reading, including both content and pedagogical knowledge. RECA is designed to measure a narrow range of skills fundamental to the teaching of reading and not necessarily the skills a teacher needs to have to teach literacy to children in California. And there are two different versions of the RECA written exam and the RECA video exam. Table 19 and Table 20 show the numbers of examinees taking the RECA for each of the last 5 years and their passing rates. And again, for RECA, there's far more information in the appendix about passing rates and numbers of examinees by various demographic variables. Next up is CTEL, California Teacher of English Learners exam. And CTEL is an exam for candidates who didn't complete a Senate Bill 2042 teacher preparation program that includes an authorization to teach English learners, and it's also used by out-of-state candidates who do not already have an English learner authorization. Tables 23 and 24 show the numbers of CTEL examinees and passing rates for each of the last 5 years. And following CSET is a section on the CSET World Language Bilingual Specific Examinations. So some of the subtests for the CSET World Languages exams are bilingual specific, and they're used to measure the knowledge and skills required to effectively teach English learners and other students in bilingual classroom settings. Tables 26 and 27 show the numbers of examinees and pass rates for examinees who report taking the bilingual specific subtests of CSET Spanish for the purpose of earning a bilingual authorization in Spanish. Spanish is the most administered language for the CSET World Languages, so that's why it's the one we highlight here. And finally, the last exam in this report is the CPACE, or the California Preliminary Administrative Credential Exam. And this is the Commission's exam option for a preliminary administrative credential, different from the APA talked about this morning. And it's used to measure whether entry-level principals and other school administrators have the standards relevant knowledge necessary for competent professional practice. The CPACE was first developed in 2011, and in 2014, the Commission asked us to update the CPACE to make it more of a performance-based assessment. And in August 2015, the Commission adopted a new SAT passing score for the CPACE that exists now, which consists of two parts. To pass the CPACE, an examinee has to pass both components or subtests, including the CPACE content examination and a CPACE performance assessment. Table 28 shows all of the annual and cumulative passing rates for CPACE, and you'll notice that the total CPACE passing rate on the bottom is fairly low. And then, of course, the passing rates by candidate-reported gender, ethnicity, and other demographic variables can be found in the appendix. Same as there's a lot of additional information for all of the exams in the appendix, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
We do have a public comment card. Janet Davis, if you'll please come up, state your name and affiliation.
We're going to talk about reading next time, but I did find that RICA data in the appendix very interesting because it more clearly shows the discrepancy between the overall pass rate and teachers of color, teachers who English is not their first language, who are probably our future bilingual teachers, and people who want to become ed specialists. Another group we want to have more of. So all three of those groups who are being stopped by that barrier are the exact people that we want to see more of. And I think, we've heard ad nauseum all this stuff, all the data about, this conversation has gone on. And I realized at breakfast today that it's the old reading wars. And I was like, God, no wonder it's reverberating. I'm remembering 20 years ago. I'm remembering getting in trouble for teaching reading and phonics during that period. And then I got in trouble for modifying the open court for English learners. So I just remember the intense craziness of what used to be there. And it was a belief. You had true believers who believed in this. People converted to phonics. I mean, it was nuts. And when I read those, I Googled it. I said, God, that's why this thing upsets me. It's because that's what you're hearing sometimes from people. It's that thing. And bilingual education is the same thing. Now people would say, I believe in bilingual education. We don't talk that. Now we know data, right? We know we're not believing in things, we know things. So that's the big point that I would like to say is we're keeping out the people that we want. And so I think all the things you're going to talk about next time, it's not matched to the standards and why are we testing people on old standards, blah, blah, blah. But let's think about the consequence of what we're doing, because it's right there in the appendix. Lots of interesting data in there.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And we will be discussing that at our next meeting in September. Is that correct? All right. Commissioners, any comments on this data that was just presented? Yes, Commissioner.
How long has it been since we've looked at the CBEST?
We did some new development for CBEST a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. We did went through the item banks and got rid of a bunch of outdated items and things, and had developed a few more items to fill in some of the places where the outdated items needed to be replaced. And we did have those items go through the usual process with the bias review committee and the content review committees for updating that exam. But it's been a few years since we looked at CBEST.
Commissioner Sloan?
Just three areas in the report that have come up in similar ways over time. But I think that we have things on the agenda now to address them. So one is with respect to the CSET. We have certain pass rates on certain tests that are quite low, like the ELD test. The mathematics, secondary mathematics has always been low, and we've always wondered in some ways what's happening there. But I think our discussions, that our future discussions we will be having about what does it mean to know your subject matter and how do we know a candidate has the right knowledge before going in, is where we need to focus our attention now. But this is still helping us understand some of the problems that we need to solve. The second thing, as people have brought up, is the RICA, and that is on the agenda for next time. And there are some questions I have around whether it would be helpful or not around certain patterns that we might see in the test as it currently stands. So there are those 5 domains. Are there patterns in what candidates are passing and not passing amongst those 5 domains? The other thing has to do with the types of questions. There are multiple choice questions, there are constructed response questions, and then maybe short answer type questions. And then there's this case study. What do we know about those pieces that could help us in this next discussion? I think would be great to know. And then the final thing that I would just note is that the exam, what is it, the NES exam, the exam that early completer options take, I still wonder about the very high pass rate, a 97% pass rate. gives me pause. And I'm not sure what that means, but it is something that I think we should continue to pay attention to as we continue our conversations about the early completer option. So thank you for putting the report together.
Commissioner Hartwig?
Thanks. I also had that question about the very high completion pass rate for the NES, so I'm interested in learning about whether that indicates anything or not about the value of what that assessment is. I just had one question about I was looking at the CBEST numbers, particularly for the writing section, and was noticing a pretty significant decrease in passage rate for both first-time passers and cumulative passers over the last 5 years that you don't really see in the two other sections, but the difference between, I guess, starting out at 75.3% passage in 2013 to 14 versus 66.6 for 2017 to 18. And I just wanted to know if we know any information about why there seems to be this steady decline in the writing section passage. Thanks.
Because we don't know where candidates are coming from when they take the examination, the CBEST, it's that first entry level. It's difficult to speculate. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I would just say that all of the numbers that you see here, all of our statistics that we report on these exams for pass rates are sample dependent. So each cohort is independent, and so the pass rates are dependent on who's in that cohort and then any other additional factors that we look at. So when it comes to something like the CBEST, as Catherine mentioned, some of those people who are taking the CBEST are coming out of undergraduate programs. Some of them are in teacher prep. Some of them are coming from other careers. Some of them are coming from no careers. And so we don't know where people are coming from when they initially become interested in the teacher preparation world. And CBEST is just an indicator of that. So really all we can say about those numbers decreasing is that the particular group of candidates who took CBEST writing during those years just didn't perform as well as other groups of candidates did in other years. But we don't have any speculation as to why that's the case.
Commissioner Sloan?
I had a similar question around that, and I also was struck by the description of who the test takers were during this year, and that 40% of them had indicated they were taking the CBEST because they wanted a substitute teaching permit, and the others were taking the test because they wanted to become fully credentialed teachers. And I wondered about those percentages, if that's changed over time. I would suspect, and I'm just speculating here, that with the teacher shortage and the word out that you can become a substitute teacher and you're going to be in high demand right now, and all you have to do is pass the CBEST, that we might be seeing different kinds of test takers as a result.
I think that that's probably the case. Just in the number of years that I've been doing this report with the Commission, I've seen that ratio change a little bit. We've, of course, also seen, and this group has talked about, the number of PIPs and STIPs increasing and things like that, and different emergency authorizations are increasing. And so I think that there is something to be said about that, but I don't know off the top of my head what those numbers. I don't have them all in front of me for the last year, but I would say that your observation matches my observation over the past several years as well.
And then I would just say this is one of those areas where the historical trends that we have noticed for a very long time that have concerned us is a place that we want to be sure that we're able to really pay attention to. So I think there are, as I stated earlier, a number of ways that we are starting to do that with the RECA and the CSET and even the CBEST, I hope, because as many people have said here, we want to be sure that there aren't barriers to the teacher profession that shouldn't be there, that there are ways to ensure that we have quality teachers in the classroom without excluding people who we want in there.
Okay, so this is an information item. No action is needed at this time. Thank you, Ms. Polster and Mr. Taylor. Okay, and our last item today, before we go into closed session, is item 2D, the update on the Integrated Undergraduate Teacher Preparation Program grants. This item is being presented by Yor Osawamni and Dr. Kara Mendoza. This is an information item. Dr. Mendoza, will you please begin?
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Good afternoon, Commission members. Iori Asamwani and I are pleased to bring before you today information about the Integrated Undergraduate Teacher Preparation Program grants. Before we present the program data, we would like to give a little quick background and context to this particular grant program. In the 2016-17 fiscal year, the legislature approved $10 million for integrated grants that would focus on addressing teacher shortages in special education, STEM, bilingual education, and other shortage areas, and providing expanded and streamlined options for earning a preliminary teaching credential program, or credential here in California. As a result of this funding, the Commission administered a competitive RFP process open to baccalaureate granting institutions with accredited teacher preparation programs that would be interested in developing a new 4-year or revising an existing 5-year program, whereby program participants would earn both a bachelor's degree and a teaching credential in 4 years. When granting awards, priority was given to proposals that address special education, STEM, and bilingual education, and those that proposed a plan to partner with a California community college. At the 2018 November Commission meeting, staff reported that 41 post-secondary institutions were granted awards up to $250,000. Table 1 displays the grant recipients, their community college partners, their planned integrated credential programs, and the grant award amount. Initial data from integrated grant programs was due shortly after that in December of 2018. And today's agenda item presents the results of that data reported to the Commission at that time. For this agenda item, we will report in 2 parts. Part 1, my colleague Yori will report data related to numbers of programs, enrollees, starting dates of programs, size of cohorts, and the like. And I will come back later and talk about program planning, recruitment effectiveness, program design features, effectiveness of implementation strategies, and the all-famous and very popular challenges and lessons learned. So now my colleague Iori will now share with you some of the initial data.
Thank you, Kara. Moving on to the initial data collection. In order to analyze the impact of the integrated undergraduate program, the authorizing legislation and the RFP require grantees to provide the Commission with initial program data and 3 years of outcome data after receiving the grant. In fall of 2018, staff initiated the initial data collection process from grantees. The list on page 5 shows the mandated areas of data collection. As already mentioned by my colleague Kara, I will be discussing the number part of the data collection, starting with the types of programs planned under the grant. As of December 31st, 2018, the grantees reported that 85 integrated undergraduate credential programs have been developed and or modified. 21 of these programs were multiple subject, 27 were single subject, 27 were education specialists, and 11 of the credential programs included a bilingual authorization. Table 2 on page 5 shows the types of integrated credential programs by their type. It is noteworthy to highlight the integrated programs with the greatest number. Education specialist, mild/moderate, has a total of 16. Multiple subject with bilingual authorization has a total of 11, and multiple subject with a single subject math has a total of 10. Next to the data collection is the implementation, that is, when cohorts plan to start. The grantees were asked when they intend to enroll their first cohort of candidates in these new programs. Figure 1 on page 6 shows the semester year grantees are intending to enroll their first cohort. The majority of grantees reported they intend to enroll their first cohort participants in the fall of semester of 2018. The next most common start semester was fall 2019. Following the implementation data is the projected size of the initial cohort data. The grantees were asked to provide the numbers of teacher preparation candidates they expect to recruit for their initial cohort. Figure 2 on page 7 shows how many candidates each of the grantees are projecting to enroll. 40 of the integrated credential programs projected 0 to 10 candidates in the initial cohort. Additionally, 18 programs projected enrollment of 11 through 20. And another 18 programs are expecting 21 to 40 candidates in their initial cohort. In addition, grantees were asked what choices candidates had to meet the subject matter competency requirement in the proposed program. This question comes in part of the authorizing legislation requirement that integrated programs were to create programs with candidates engaged in professional preparation concurrently with subject matter preparation while completing their baccalaureate degrees. Table 3 on page 7 shows candidates are able to meet the subject matter competency requirement in the planned programs. Of the 85 proposed credential programs, candidates in 17 programs will meet subject matter competency via passing the CSAT only. 48 programs will allow candidates to either pass CSAT or complete a commission-approved subject matter program offered by the grantee. 18 programs would allow candidates to meet a subject matter competency via a program offered by another institution. And 2 programs would allow candidates to use all 3 options. This sums up the first part of the data report. My colleague Kara will share the second part of the data report.
Thank you. So for reporting processes, grantees were provided a list of program planning approaches and were asked which of these approaches presented to them were effective, somewhat effective, very effective, or whether or not they'd even use that approach. Table 4 on page 8 provides this data. Of the selected planning approaches, holding collaborative planning meetings with colleagues at the grantee institution was considered very effective, as 80% of the respondents reported. Some grantees reported other effective approaches, such as providing stipends for faculty and staff to redesign courses, increasing communication with stakeholders within and outside of the institution, and participating in the CSU-wide ITEP leadership meetings. In another question, grantees were asked about the recruitment strategies and their effectiveness. Table 5 on page 9 provides this data. 51% of the grantees reported that developing and providing marketing brochures about the integrated program to prospective candidates was a very effective recruitment strategy. Developing e-marketing materials was also considered very effective. Grantees also noted some effective recruitment strategies in the realm of relationship building, including working with alumni, hosting field trip events with potential students, and other types of face-to-face outreach. Next, grantees were asked to provide a brief overview of key design features of the program. Many programs emphasize the importance of advising participants regularly throughout their journey, building collaboration across departments and with major stakeholders. Program leaders also shared the many configurations for which coursework candidates would be required to take and when they would take that coursework. On page 10, you will see some direct examples of some key design features from the reports we garnered. Grantees were also asked about the effectiveness of implementation strategies. Now, most of the integrated programs, as Iori reported, began in the fall of 2018, and this data was collected in December of 18. So the information regarding the effectiveness of the implementation strategies is limited. But some programs did share their perceptions of the efficacy of their implementation strategies, and 2 themes emerged. As you can imagine, the importance of collaboration and the importance of recruitment. Last, we asked grantees about challenges and lessons learned to planning and implementing an integrated teacher preparation program. Institutions were able to clearly articulate challenges and the steps they took to overcome said challenges. Pages 11 and 12 present a selection of challenges and lessons learned selected from the grantees' narratives. One of our favorite responses was this. One lesson learned is that designing the program is only the first step. Enacting the program takes a lot of real effort. Yeah, it does. Truer words were never said. So, I'll pass it back to Ori to close our presentation.
Awesome, thanks. For next steps, Commission staff will continue to monitor the integrated undergraduate teacher preparation programs via an annual required data report for 3 more years, and will present that information at Commission meetings. Grantees will be submitting the first required year of outcome data in late August 2019, this month. And there will be 2 more years of required data reporting to the Commission. Staff will continue to update the Commission annually with yearly and cumulative data from the grantees. This concludes our report, and we are happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
We don't have any public comments, so commissioners, would you like to comment on this item? I just want to make a note that I like the section challenges and lessons learned. Executive Director Sandy, did you want to say something?
I'd just like to say that over the last several years, we've had the opportunity to manage close to $200 million in grants to stimulate teacher recruitment, teacher development across the board. It's been an exciting opportunity. And these 2 individuals at this end of the table have done a huge amount of work to make this a going concern for us. We're actually, and so has Dr. Jacobson over there and Terry's whole unit. Everybody is into reading grants over there. They read a lot of grant proposals these days. But so this is fairly new work for us. We used to do this in when there was money in an earlier era. But it's been a really great opportunity for us, I think, as a commission to provide some kind of support to the field. And this one in particular, I am so interested in the results of this effort to build integrated undergraduate programs, to see if this creates a faster pathway, if it becomes a clear major of choice for candidates who enter college thinking, maybe I'd like to be a teacher, and now there's an efficient way to get that done without having to stop and then go on to grad school and do all of that. We have a history in this state of having multiple pathways into teaching, and it's really critical. We're a large state. We have shortages. We need to open every legitimate door we can to bring people in. But this undergraduate pathway is going to be, I hope it's really going to take, because I'd really like to see what happens at the undergrad level. And truly, in my heart of hearts, I would love to run a program like that as a lab. A lab. Give me a 4-year lab major that I could work with, where every candidate enrolled in an integrated program is doing the kind of observation necessary to understand teaching and different pedagogies and what works for them as a learner versus their friends. And, what a great opportunity we have to grow this. So I just wanted to shine on this work and that it's been an effort to get it up and running, but these 2 make it look effortless. Thank you.
Just to add, each time we come to these reports, they're wonderful learning vehicles. And so I think this is a very important part of the work that you all are doing, because you're bringing back what you're learning, what the field is learning, and then what we can learn, not only for thinking about future integrated programs, but all of our programs. So it's also making me think about how we might want to report on some of our other work that we're doing. So thank you for bringing these examples forward.
Commissioner Martinez?
Hi, thank you again for the report as well. I would love to see, as we move forward, a lot more demographic data to see who actually takes opportunity of this program, since a lot of folks have talked about kind of a financial restriction when it's 5 years, and also because a lot of the partners are community colleges where a majority of Latinos go to school. So I'd love to see a lot more demographic data about the pipeline, and if this changes, who's coming into the profession.
Ask and you shall receive. That is the data we're collecting even as we speak. Because this particular report was about what are you projecting, most of our programs have started, and that's the data that's coming next. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional comments, thank you so much, Ms. Sosamwani and Dr. Mendoza. That was a very thorough report. And having no additional items for today, I recess the Educator Preparation Committee. Till tomorrow.
Till tomorrow. Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Okay, I will now recess the general session. Members of the commission will go into closed session. The general session will reconvene at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I know.